I kind of realized what was going on, and then suddenly like there were flashbacks and everything, and I was really coming to the realization that I needed help.
Are you okay if we go back and talk about it?
During my first bodybuilding competition actually was when I really saw the repercussions of not taking care of your mental health. We put a lot of self-judgment on ourselves, and a lot of those voices in our own heads are really just the voices from others. I really started taking a look into my mental health and figuring out, okay, what is the reason that I am competing at this point? What is this doing not only for my body, for my mind, and my overall health?
Do you think people get caught in a loop of thinking they don't have control?
Absolutely. And I think that that could be caused by so many things, whether it's somebody in their life making them feel that way, or they experience maybe a traumatic event. There's still always something that makes me feel like, should I be doing this? Like, is this really me? And I was able to then learn a little bit more about emotions and what labeling emotions in a sense of figuring out, okay, so
welcome to today's podcast episode, where we dive into the world of personal development, health and wellness, and overcoming life challenges that may come our way with our special guest, Brittany. From athlete to fitness competitor to health and wellness enthusiast, Brittany will help dive us into how to create a more sustainable life in your health and wellness journey. Brittany, welcome to today's podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm so happy that you're here.
Happy to be here.
So Brittany, who are you?
I am an online wellness coach, and I help women really just take a look into themselves, figuring out their bodies better and learning how to navigate their lifestyle in order to sustain whatever health goals that they really want, but also really have a balanced lifestyle between wellness as a whole, taking care of themselves, self-love, and all of that.
I love that. I absolutely love that. How did you get into that?
Yeah, it started when I was bodybuilding, actually. And I think that this is so common for many bodybuilders. I think that when you bodybuild for so long, you start to realize that it is not a sustainable lifestyle at all, as I'm sure you know. And during my first bodybuilding competition actually was when I really saw the repercussions of not taking care of your mental health. And I remember my last week of competing, I ended up being on a deficit, so much so that I was only eating 500 calories a day.
Damn. Okay.
It was brutal. And on top of that, it was 750 calories of cardio being burned every single day during that peak week when usually you're supposed to like taper off and things like that. And that took a toll on me, not only mentally, but physically as well. Like it got to a point where like I would sit in a chair and my joints would hurt so bad because there wasn't
during peak week or just leading up to the show?
During that peak week, and like leading up to the show as well.
Damn.
Yeah. Like I couldn't train for a couple days just because my joints were so, like they were just in so much pain. There wasn't enough fat between my bones.
To be clear, we're not condoning this type of ways to get on stage
Not
either.
At all. Not at all.
So from that moment, when you obviously experienced that level of pain, that from the choices to get on stage, what made you want to look to a different alternative? It
was probably a few months after I competed, and I had to restructure my whole metabolism again, figure all of that out, gain those hunger cues back. And after that, I really started taking a look into my mental health and figuring out, okay, what is the reason that I am competing at this point? And what is this doing not only for my body, but for my mind and my overall health? And then once I kind of got to that point, I fell back into kind of the world of competing again.
Damn, okay, you went back?
I know.
Went back.
I know. I went back after that. And truthfully, I was doing all of my competing naturally to begin with. Yeah. But I wanted to prove to myself that I could go into another show and not have such a terrible experience with it, and also not rebound so shitty after.
Did you rebound overeating, like binging?
Heavily.
Okay.
Heavily.
Which is normally common.
So common. Yeah. And I think if for anybody who decides to spend 2 months of eating 800 calories a day, I think that it's so common and not enough people talk about it. Your metabolism starts to slow down like crazy and your gut is super unhealthy, eating the exact same meals every single day.
Yep.
And then, yeah, after that, I ended up gaining, I think, 30 pounds within 2 months. Damn. After I competed. And it was brutal.
How did that affect you mentally?
The body dysmorphia was insane. I think
real.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think I spent the next 2 months after that. I told myself like I'm going to go into this powerlifting journey, and I started training really heavy. And anytime I would step foot into the gym, I was just wearing baggy clothes, especially on those tough body dysmorphia days. And I remember like I was holding on to any shred of abs that I had.
You can't have abs and the booty, so you always have to choose.
Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do.
Do you, if your body dysmorphia was amplified during that time, do you feel like you always had it, or is something that it was a product of?
That's an interesting question. I think that it comes down to the way that you, or the relationship that you already have with your body. And so I think growing up, I knew that I was on the skinnier side.
Yeah, okay.
So I grew up playing sports. I played soccer from when I was in fifth grade all the way to like my sophomore year of high school. And then I also ran cross country throughout high school. So that was obviously going to make me smaller and shrink a little bit. And then around my senior year of high school, I was like, I do not feel that comfortable being so small. And I felt like I wasn't strong enough to even stand up for myself. And so I feel like having your mental health play a role into how you view yourself as a person, and like having that correlation between the way that you view your body and yourself, that definitely plays a part into like your own self-worth. I
agree. I think there's some level of self-worth that I feel like competitors chase, that usually comes through their physique, or they're trying to be stronger and it's a product of. But I think that body dysmorphia and, let's call it body dysmorphia, is somewhat amplified during competing.
Absolutely.
Because you're getting to a level of lean and, leanness that is not normal.
Yeah.
So after your, let's call it the binging episode.
Yeah.
And you went back on stage again. Was that your final time, or did you go again?
I did back to back after that.
So 3 shows.
3 shows total. Okay. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'll never do it again.
Okay. Do you recommend it to people, knowing what you know now? I don't regret it. Okay.
I don't think I would ever regret the experience that I had with it, because I learned a lot about myself through the process in terms of how it affects your body and the repercussions on that side of things, and how long it takes to fully feel healthy again. I don't recommend it, but I think that there are a lot of pros to doing it. There's also, like, as we were talking about before, there's a level of confidence that you end up having when you do compete and step up on stage and all of that. And I think that that's very valuable. It's valuable to end up having that confidence in yourself, because when you reach that level, you know you can reach it again, but you can reach it outside of competitions. So
of having to get to that level of, you're essentially starving the body of what it needs to get to that place. So it's like, is the risk worth the reward? The reward is a trophy and accolades and validation, right?
Literally.
Yeah. Literally. Okay, so after your show, what problems arose for you? Apart from the body dysmorphia, the rebounding, what internal health problems arose? My gut. I think, and my metabolism for sure. Okay. So I experienced insane bloating, and it was really bad. Like, I have pictures. I just remember feeling so uncomfortable to even move, but movement was ultimately what helped me get through the bloating. Okay. And what I even noticed when I was prepping for my second and third competition was when I was doing cardio,
even if I felt bloated, once I started doing cardio, I felt better after about 30 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
And so that was always interesting to me, but the bloating when I was binge eating for sure was so painful.
I can imagine. Was it because you were eating in excess of, just so everyone's getting an idea, right? Was it because you're eating in excess calories, or was it just the foods that you were eating that was causing the bloating?
I think all of the above. It was like I had a hollow leg. I remember tracking. It was so bad. I tracked, I think maybe 2 days during that time, and I was probably eating over 10,000 calories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, within just a couple days.
Damn.
And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm craving cookies. I'm going to have all of the cookies that I want. And it was nonstop. Just if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. But it was to the point where my body didn't even know when it was satiated.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I had to heal my metabolism in that way of relearning those hunger cues, and then ultimately healing my gut, because once I stopped and started taking out the processed foods again, once I started tracking better and I committed myself to a reverse diet before I competed a second and third time. After I started taking out those unhealthy processed foods, my body completely rejected processed foods as a whole.
Damn.
Yeah.
Is that, like, when you say rejected, do you mean like you've either were bloating, just uncomfortableness, or what was happening?
Yeah. And even now, my body is still doing this. It's more of like discomfort, whether it's bloating, gas, like all of
the fun
that.
things.
All
Yeah.
of the fun
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So is that any processed food?
Pretty much. Yeah. Like if I have Pop-Tarts right now, I'd probably
And they're
feel
delicious.
pretty crappy.
Yeah. Oh, that's a shame. That's actually a shame. So when you made that transition and decided that you had to change how you were approaching your nutrition, heal your gut and all that, what was the first step that you took?
So I actually followed Stephanie Buttermore. I think I'm saying that right.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but let's roll with it.
We'll roll with it. I was following her at the time, and I still do. Love her. She was doing her all-in journey, and I want to say she might have just finished it when I was finishing my first competition.
Okay, yeah.
And so seeing her go through all of that, it was kind of like inspiring me to do the same. And so that's why I decided not to be super restrictive of my diet. And obviously for her, she had gone through years of competing. So for me, I already knew that going through an all-in journey probably wouldn't take as long as it took her to go through it. And so for that amount of time, it was just like, I'm going to eat what I want. I'm going to eat what I crave. I'm going to honor those cravings. And then I know this is going to rework itself. And
I actually think I've seen her content a little bit. She went all in, as in she ate whatever she wanted when she wanted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Phenomenal, and a phenomenal thing to watch and inspiring at the same time, because she competed, right?
for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So having competed, knowing what your body can do, and you're taking it to a place that it's also never been before, the mental capacity that you have to have for that and understand and compassion to have for yourself is huge. Did you find the same thing that you're having, or places?
I did. Yeah. I definitely feel like throughout that journey and seeing my body change so much, going from literally as small as I've ever been in my life to then the biggest I had ever been, it was like, okay, I'm going to understand that this is where my body is at, and I'm still going to love myself regardless. And I feel like just going through that process, I'm able to bring that in with my clients and show them like, you can still love yourself in every part of your journey. And I think this is also why I feel so much more open to talk about it now, because back then I was so shameful about it. I felt so much shame around just being as big as I was. It was like, damn, 2 months ago I was so small, and all of a sudden everyone, even the gym I was going to, everyone knew that I had competed.
Yeah.
And then everyone sees you 2 months later looking completely different. They're like, what happened?
I think that's the hardest thing with competing.
Yeah.
Is that actually, outside of competing, that's the hardest thing with society, is everybody wants to see lean or tiny bodies or figures. Or so when you get to your leanness of stage and you're noticing the veins and the vascularity, people validate that.
Yeah.
And the more it's validated, the more you're like, oh yes, that's how I have to look. And then when you come out of the show and you're starting to gain weight back on, that's already a mental fuck for you. But then the outside validation of telling you you look fantastic is slowly going away. So I think any competitor can understand what that transition is like and how hard it is.
Yeah. And it is also really common to just, if you're in a deficit because you're so restrictive with your diet, it's much more common and it's much easier to just kind of fall into those habits of binge eating.
Yes.
And there are a lot of studies even showing that if you decide to go on a restrictive diet instead of like eating the cookie when you want a cookie, you end up regaining all of the weight that you ended up losing during that deficit.
Yep.
But you typically end up gaining even more.
I think that's a very important lesson for anybody on their weight loss journey or thinking about it, is fast is not always best. That long-term consistent change in habits is any goal for any weight loss or recomposition, whatever you want to call it. Slow, consistent change is far, far greater.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If somebody's binge eating, do you believe that there's something greater that's causing the binge eating, or do you think it's just a habit that's been created over time?
I like this question.
Excellent.
I like this. I think it's, and I feel like I say this a lot, it's a case-by-case basis. I think that when someone is binge eating, it could be from a number of different things. So it can be because maybe there's a stressor in their life that is causing them to feel like food is the only thing that can settle them down. And so sometimes if that's the case, you have to look at your nervous system. How is your mental health in that? And how can we start practicing healthier habits in place of binge eating? Not to say that you can't eat, not to be more restrictive, but to say that, okay, we can eat the foods that we still enjoy, but we can also include these healthier habits in case you end up feeling bad or shame about how much you are eating. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
Okay, yeah.
100% makes sense. So if I'm at home and, because there is a lot of shame around eating, whether somebody is binging, unfortunately purging, or starving themselves, there's shame around all three of those into whatever capacity that person might feel. How do I try and redirect a better habit?
Knowing that there is probably a greater cause for this, whether it's around the way that you view yourself or literally anything else. It could be anything. Anything could be causing that. So giving yourself grace and understanding that it's not just you. Like, you're not the only one out there who is experiencing this, but also understanding that you are also in control and you don't have to give that control to any other external factor in your life, and kind of rewiring your mind in that sense. Then you're able to start readjusting.
Do you think people get caught in a loop of thinking they don't have control?
Absolutely. And I think that could be caused by so many things, whether it's somebody in their life making them feel that way, or they experience maybe a traumatic event that has caused them to then have that kind of engraved in their brain of, okay, look, I don't have control because XYZ happened to me. Then it's like, that's going to cause you to kind of spiral. And I think that you are the only person who can truly make that change for yourself. And so if you want to change, you can, but you have to want it for yourself too.
Of course, right? We can never change for somebody outside. Otherwise the change won't ever stick.
Yeah.
It will be for something else. And then you'll end up questioning, or you might not question, whether the change that you made was something that you really wanted or was it for somebody else.
Yeah. And then that could cause you to even go back into the spiral.
That's very true. just a constant loop of spirals.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah. You have mentioned a lot about mental health. What, apart from competing, what kind of pushed you down that track to want to dive more into it?
Yeah. So I don't ever talk about my childhood, but I feel like growing up, I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues that I never understood or could put a label on or anything. And so surrounding that, I do feel like I love my family, by the way. I don't ever think that, they forced.
I'm sure they don't doubt that.
Yeah. They've never forced anything on me or anything like that. But it was just like something that I was dealing with internally of, these thoughts that were just coming into my head. And it was almost like I was giving into them. And then it caused me to go into that spiral. But then years later, when I was in high school, I ended up being raped by my first boyfriend, which was crazy. And after that, I didn't even realize what had happened or what label to kind of place on that until a year later. And the crazy part about it is I didn't realize what it was until I was sitting on the couch with my mom. She was using her little exercise bike while watching,
like the old school ones.
Oh yeah. While she was watching like Dateline or something, or like
that's an old show,
or like 60 Seconds. I don't.
Damn. Okay, yeah.
Or 60 Minutes or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was watching something along those lines, and I just happened to be in the room, and they start talking about this woman that was a victim of marital rape, and I'm watching this episode. I'm like, what is that? That's a thing? I feel like there's a big stigma around rape having to be some stranger in a bush jumping out to get you.
That was very specific, but no, you are right. You are very right. But please continue.
After that, after I watched that episode, I kind of realized what was going on. And then suddenly, like, there were flashbacks and everything. And I was really coming to the realization that I needed help. And so I told my mom that I needed to see a therapist. I blamed it on something else because I wasn't going to tell her. I wasn't ready. And so I started seeing a therapist, and that is what really started getting me interested more into how I can rewire my brain and kind of heal any traumatic events that I experienced in my life.
Firstly, I'm so sorry. Like, so sorry.
It's okay.
I think sometimes that's the only thing you can say in situations like that. Are you okay if we go back and talk about it?
We absolutely can.
Cool.
Yeah.
What around that situation, because it's a consent thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What around that was confusing for you? You 16?
I was 15 at the time.
Okay, so 15-year-old you. What was confusing around that time?
There were a handful of things. I think that ironic, we were in the same health class, and so we were learning about consent at the time.
Interesting. And
so I remember saying no, and obviously the no didn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I felt at the time too. And after that, after everything had happened, I was just like, well, it is what it is. And I kind of accepted it just to make myself feel better. And I brushed it away like it never happened. And so after that too, there were a number of things that happened surrounding that relationship. He ended up breaking up with me, ghosting me a week later. And then like a few months down the line, he told his friends to slut shame me through the halls. And it was a wild time.
Mm.
So
I think high school is a wild time.
High school is totally.
And
yeah.
On some level, I think high school is a wild time. Everyone's just trying to find their place and fit in and understand how the world works in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think conversations around consent, especially for young men, but then also women, to understand how to have consent in in those types of dynamics, but also understanding what a no means is something that I think is missed in school on both sides. Speaking obviously from my experience going through high school and what it was like, I went to high school in Australia, so different to an American school system. But what we were offered as in for sex ed or health or anything like that was subpar at best. Yeah. So consent to me is one of those things that, and I think people make jokes about it, and I understand jokes. Sometimes they're funny, right? But sometimes it's like, was it funny? And the what's the saying? No really means yes. And I think that's such a terrible, terrible line for young men to have in their heads, or for women to think that their no is not worth anything.
Yeah, or not valid.
Yeah.
And I think too with women or young women especially, I think that when you are put in that situation, there's a lot of pressure surrounding that. And so if you do say no, there's a lot of things that could happen because you said no. Like, oh, well, you said no, well, we're going to break up, or well, you're weird for that. Or then you start being labeled different things. Yeah, it's a lot of shame and guilt. And I think if I could go back in time, I would tell my younger self. That was going to be my next question. So please.
That's perfect.
I think I would have told her that it's okay. And it's okay to not want it. And it's okay to wait. And it's okay to tell somebody no and respect yourself enough to respect your own boundaries. Because no one is going to respect your boundaries as much as you are going to respect those boundaries.
That's 1000% true. Do you think that we're not taught enough what boundaries are?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that that's honestly what likely was the beginning of it. And I think that if I had known where I could place boundaries and feel safe in those boundaries, that would have changed everything for me.
Did you ever develop any shame around sex after that? Like hearing you talk about obviously the situation as to what happened and then what the events that led after the fact. For a young 15-year-old girl, I don't want to speak wrongly here, but was it your first time?
That was my first time.
Yes. So then around sex as a whole, how did that develop for you?
I think this is weird to say, but I think I was very lucky. It never affected how I felt around sex and sexuality and things like that.
So it developed on a relatively healthy scale.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Do you think that's because I'm trying to find the right words here. The situation was very different to if somebody was to be attacked.
I think that I didn't develop any negative feelings towards it because the next time I had done it, I did feel much safer.
Okay.
And I think that's probably the only
huge.
Yeah, I think that's the only reason why I didn't develop any negativity towards it.
That is actually really, really, really huge.
Yeah. And like I said, I feel so lucky because of that. And I think that even just now, way older, obviously, I've grown through it. And it's one of those situations where I wouldn't have changed what had happened because I've grown so much from it and I learned a lot from it. But I also think that with what I've experienced now, I understand a lot better about myself and where those boundaries can be and being so firm, like I said, too, about those boundaries.
How did you you started going to therapy, right? How did you move from that? Because it would have been a very confusing time for you, semi-dark, depending on how you transition from that side of it. How did you move from that place to a place of essentially taking your power back?
I think the first thing that honestly helped me, which is a weird thing to say, what helped me is that my therapist ended up labeling what I was feeling. She said it was situational depression. And so I think just even labeling it in that way, that it was just because of this one situation, knowing and being able to say I was depressed during that time, I think that was helpful to me in order to kind of pinpoint it, understand it, look at it almost from an outside perspective looking in.
Yeah, okay.
And analyzing it from there in a sense, and then understanding that this is a one-time thing in my life. That doesn't mean that this is going to happen forever and that it's going to change who I am as a person forever. And so understanding that kind of helped me find light in it. And then from there, I was able to not only heal myself, but then talk about it openly.
Which is huge.
Yeah. And that was the summer going into my sophomore year of high school. And so then by my senior year, I ended up becoming ASB president of the school. And I brought speakers.
To clarify, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's like student body president, essentially. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I was able to bring speakers to talk about just sexual assault as a whole.
Because you were still in high school. So thinking of what happened, you're still facing the same people, the same person, and being able to completely take your control back of your life at that age, while simultaneously being able to take control of a situation you didn't have control in is, yeah, that's huge. You should be very, very proud of yourself.
Thank you.
So now that you look at your mental health journey, if somebody's listening at home and they're trying to find some form of light in anything that they're going through, whether it be a relationship breakup, something full end spectrum to sexual assault, anything like that, where do I start?
I think understanding that life is full of ebbs and flows. You're going to have those dark moments in your life, but I think feeling out and understanding the emotions that come through in those dark times, they allow you to find so much more light in those high times, in those flow moments. I think that you should feel into that problem at first, but then
like feel the heaviness of the emotion of it. Okay.
Absolutely. I think it's important to feel the heaviness and the emotion aspect of it, but then being able to take a step back and then say, okay, this is one moment in my life. Where can I go from here? And do I want to stay in this direction of feeling like shitty,
a victim,
all of those things? Or do I want to not let this be my narrative? Because at the end of the day, you have full control over who you are and the person you're going to be in this world. And so being able to understand that, I think, has helped me so much, even when I do go back into those moments of, am I getting depressed again? It's like, okay, I don't need to label this as such. I can look at it, understand what I'm feeling, and then think of a better feeling thought and go in that direction.
Do you think labels can sometimes hold us back?
I absolutely think so. And it's funny because well, not super funny, but a little funny. It's funny because when I told my sister for the first time that my therapist told me that I had situational depression, she got really mad.
Interesting.
Yeah, she got really mad because she basically looked at me and she was like, I don't want you to think that just because you have situational depression right now, that means that this is who you are.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. And so I think that when we label anybody and we label ourselves, it's almost like placing a little bit of judgment and then also a little bit of this is your character into those labels. Like
placing them in a box.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, you don't have to be what all of these people say, or even the things that you might think about yourself right now, you don't even have to be those things. You can be whoever you choose to be.
Who do you choose to be, Brittany?
I think right now I aspire to be somebody who is able to inspire others and help others recognize their full potential as a human. Because a lot of times I think that we hold ourselves back because of fear or self-doubt or even fear of judgment of others. And I think that that's one thing that I have been lucky to overcome a lot of, but there's still always something that makes me feel like, should I be doing this? Like, is this really me? But I think that when you understand that, like, you can truly be whoever you want, then you're able to take control of the judgment.
Do you feel like judgment's just a projection of how we feel about ourselves?
I think it can be how we feel about ourselves and other people's opinions. So for example, if you yourself are feeling like, I'm not worth it enough to go out and accomplish these goals.
Be a singer.
Yeah. Maybe in your head you said, I am the worst singer ever. It's likely coming from other people who have told you that you are the worst singer ever. But who knows? Maybe one person told you that you were the worst singer ever, but another person finds your voice the most soothing thing they've ever heard. Regardless of how it sounds.
Yeah, I was going to say regardless.
Regardless of how it sounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that, you know, we put a lot of self-judgment on ourselves, and a lot of those voices in our own heads are really just the voices from others.
I agree, 100%. It's hard sometimes to try and understand the voice that's our voice and the voice of somebody else's, or the voice of somebody's past, or whoever else might be in our head. I realized that meditation and journaling were my like two go-to places, and I think you're the same.
Yeah.
To try and center myself enough where I can listen and to the quietness where I can hear my voice. Or for those who are religious, they might be able to hear whoever's voice it is that they helps guide them. Myself personally, it's what I see as my higher self.
Yeah.
And then journaling is like the way of me being able to offload any negative or any positive thought that might be in my head that I'm constantly having throughout the day, because we have so many, and get it on paper so that later, if I want to go back and read it, I can read it from a different perspective. And sometimes when it is deeply negative, I personally found that I go back and read it and I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound like me. But in that moment, it was me. How do you approach meditation and journaling?
Yeah. I started journaling when I was really young. I think that one day my dad just told me, hey, you have all of these emotions. I think you should just write it down and write how you feel.
I like that.
Yeah. And I think that was super helpful for me. And so I just started writing down my experiences and how I felt in every situation. I was able to then learn a little bit more about emotions and what labeling emotions, in a sense of figuring out, okay, so right now I'm feeling angry or hurt or vulnerable. And I think that's what helped me become a little bit more emotionally mature. And then from there...
You're 23?
23.
Yeah. Yeah. Please continue. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So I think that's something that helped me a lot. And so now when I do approach journaling, I write down, as you were saying, like anything negative that I'm feeling or anything negative that I might have been experiencing. And then all of a sudden, when all of it is out, you can kind of go back and read through it and you're like, okay, so what can I rewrite now? What can I look at and say, so I wrote down, maybe as an example, right? I am angry. Even if you were angry in that time, you are not an angry person. So you can change even just that to something simple like, I feel anger. I feel these emotions sometimes, and that's okay. And I think that by taking it in that direction, you're able to understand your emotions better, but also judge yourself less for feeling those emotions. And I think that that's a huge thing, is a lot of specifically like angry people or people who have a lot of fear in them, they judge those emotions a lot when it's a normal thing to have. Those are normal emotions to feel. Sometimes something my dog does makes me mad.
I definitely feel that. I'm actually, sorry, I was one of those people who I wasn't fortunate enough in the aspect that I was able to grow up in a place where emotions were like a great thing. So I learned basically opposite of you. I learned that emotions were bad. So for me, understanding the spectrum of different emotions was nothing. I knew that there was happy and there was angry. And if you were over here in the angry section, you weren't fun.
And you didn't want to be there.
Yeah, I didn't want to be there. So constantly you were happy or had to be happy or at least present it. So for me to be able to feel or even label a different type of emotion for a very long time was like, well, I don't feel happy, but I can't tell you what else I am. So I was in a constant state of, once I was able to identify, oh, well, I'm, might be sad or feeling angry or vulnerable, it was then, well, why are you angry? And now I'm going to shame the fact that I'm angry. So it took me a very long time to be like, okay, I'm angry and that's okay.
Like for me, sometimes at home, because I didn't feel comfortable to show those emotions. Yeah. It was like, okay, it's going to be easier if I just literally hide in my room. And there were times where I would journal in my closet so that no one would find me. Or like for a long time, I had this little, so funny. I had this little cupboard that was under my bed. So there was like storage in it. And I would make space in this little cupboard just so that I could hide in it and let out any emotions that I was feeling. And I would put my toys in front of the door, so even if someone opened it, you couldn't tell I was in there.
It's actually really adorable. It's really cool.
My family would think I would go missing for hours. They're like, where
just
did Brittany
processing
go?
Emotions in the cupboard.
Literally.
That's actually amazing.
Yeah.
That's actually really good to hear that you were able to identify at that age that you wanted to process something. I think, or I can be completely way off base here, that most people don't realize that.
No, I agree. I definitely agree. I'm not sure where it stems from. I think that I just knew I didn't feel comfortable expressing the amount of emotions that I would have, because there was absolutely a lot of shame in expressing those emotions. Like if I was angry or if I was sad about something, I didn't want to be laughed at by my family. I didn't want them to look at me like, oh, you're just a little kid, or things like that. And so I think that kind of experiencing those made me find safe and comfort in my own presence and finding that solitude and quiet.
How do you feel with yourself now? Like in terms of self-acceptance or self-love, however you want to identify it as, where do you feel you are placed in that realm?
I think, as everyone does, I still do have my ups and downs with the self-love and the body dysmorphia and everything too. But I love myself a lot more than ever, for sure. I feel like I'm not constantly looking back at where I was and who I was, but I'm constantly looking towards the future, and I'm excited for the future, but I'm also excited about where I'm at right now. And I think having that balance between being excited about what's to come, being proud of your past and being able to overcome the experiences that you have, and then focusing on the now and enjoying the moments, even the little moments that you have now, I think that has helped me so much. And even like going to the gym, having emotions in the gym, whether it's like I look in the mirror and maybe one day I feel a little fluffy because I'm on my period or something. Like I still am loving my body because I understand that my body is going through a lot of hormonal challenges and that's okay. And it's a beautiful thing that we are even able to be here in the present, and we should still accept ourselves because of that.
I really like that. Like, really, I think it's very hard for, you should be really proud of the place that you're in. But I think it's very hard for women in particular. Well, actually, I can't speak for a man, but for women in particular, to find that place where they're actually truly happy or truly able to see themselves in a place where they're loving and accepting of the body that they're in, or that the person that they are. I could be off base here, but I feel like we all go through a transitional point where accepting the place that we're in now, the things that might have happened, and trying to move from that can be a difficult place for young women.
Absolutely.
Looking back, if you could give any, doesn't have to be, you from 5 years ago, but if you could give anyone listening to the podcast 3 tips, let's call it, what would you say?
I think first thing is take care of your mental health, and don't be afraid. Does this count as 1 or 2? I don't know.
We'll roll with it. See what happens. If it ends up being a 4, it's okay.
Okay. Don't be ashamed or don't feel bad about putting yourself first. That's a huge one. I think setting boundaries and respecting and loving yourself enough to feel confident in those boundaries, and to not necessarily put pressure on those boundaries, but really try to maintain those boundaries within yourself, and allowing others to respect those boundaries for you. That's a big one too. Third one, love yourself in all seasons of your life.
Oh, I love them. I actually really like them. Brittany, what's one thing that keeps you up at night?
Recently, I have had a lot of sleepless nights, so that's a very interesting question.
Let's hear it.
I think that as of lately, my business has been keeping me up at night, because I feel so passionate about the things that I do in terms of my business and my work, and I feel like it is so purpose driven.
That's phenomenal. Phenomenal. Most people search tirelessly for that. So
I'm so grateful to have found like a true purpose that I feel like I can't sleep at night for. And I love it so much. Like it's something that I wake up and I'm excited to be out of bed, because I know that the next day is going to bring me so much joy, knowing that I am able to like do what I love and do what I'm passionate about, and help others find their love for themselves, and basically wake up from being a zombie all day. Like you don't have to live like that. You don't have to live like you are unconscious walking through life and you just have to go through the motions. I used to live like that. And
I think we all do.
I think we all do or have. And life is so much more than walking around, just walking through the motions and not enjoying the present.
Yeah, being completely unaware that life is happening with or without you, and it's either happening with you or you're just there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am so incredibly happy for you.
Thank you so much.
Brittany, where can people find you?
I have Instagram, and I am not super active on TikTok, but I still have it.
That's all right. We throw it out there anyway.
And I'm also on YouTube, but the videos on there are all from prep. So if you want to see a little bit more about my prep journey, I am planning on still editing more videos and throwing them up there, even though it was from years ago. But Brittany Brunck.
For across all the boards?
Pretty sure.
Amazing. Brittany, thank you so much for joining me today on today's podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to hopefully having you on again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.